Well, first let me say I'm honored to be here with you today. I'd like to thank Pastor Mackenzie as well as Edgar Farmer for inviting Molly and me and allowing us to share this service. And I have to tell you, you've already changed my day. And so what an incredibly uplifting morning. And I understand you're currently celebrating 40 days of love.
Yes.
And I think that's not just timely and necessary in this national climate, but we need it more than ever. And you know, I have personally said to people, I know we have a long way to go. I know we have a long way to go, but there is this growing sense of unease and growing vulnerability of individuals based on what they look like and how they worship and who they love. And so this 40 days of love is more important than anything else. Edgar asked me to share, and I know some of you have already heard it, what it was like for me to grow up as a young man in the South at the time of Martin Luther King. And so I will do my best. It's not hard to remember and imagine what it was like with whites-only water fountains, to schools that had no books whatsoever, to bombing of churches. The list of injustices and inequalities at that time just seemed endless. I can't speak from the perspective of those who were truly crippled by that discrimination, but I can speak from the viewpoint of a young man at a time of considerable change. I was in the 6th grade in Richmond, Virginia, and there were many restaurants that, despite federal law, refused to integrate. And in particular, there were a group of restaurants that were just plain defiant. If a black couple were to come, they would say, they're full. Well, I see empty tables over there. Well, those tables are reserved for guests that are coming later. And it was illegal. It was clearly illegal, but extremely difficult to challenge. A group, including my mother and father, met secretly to integrate all the remaining defiant restaurants on a single night. And their plan was relatively simple. A white couple would enter the restaurant and ask for a table of 4, saying that another couple would be joining them. And shortly thereafter, the black couple would arrive. When the host told the couple there were no seats, they responded, "No problem, we're joining a couple that is already here." And of course, in that single night, they couldn't refuse, and every remaining defiant restaurant in the city of Richmond, Virginia, was integrated. So my parents' pictures were in the newspaper, a white couple with a black couple. It was rather big news in Richmond. And then I watched the color in my mother's face drain when she listened to someone on the phone. And in my household, I was not allowed to answer the phone or answer the door for many months because my parents did not want their children to be subjected to that level, and I don't even want to utter the word, but it's the opposite of the one that's up there on the wall. You know, in telling that story, I actually don't want you to think about a white couple that might be trying to do the right thing. I want you to think about what it must have been like, and surely many of you know, of how it was that a couple would work to change the system who did not have privilege and did not have authority and wasn't viewed as having rights, and what they must have endured. My family then moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and planned to go to a concert in an inner city theater. My mother absolutely loved the gospel singer Mahalia Jackson, who had this powerful contralto voice, and she wanted to listen to her in person. So off we went, and I have to tell you that I don't believe my father was on time for anything at any time that I was a teenager, and this was no exception. And so off we went. We had trouble finding a place to park. It was near the theater. We basically ran into the very last minute into the auditorium, and a whole sea of brown and black faces turned around to look at this single white family with 4 kids rushing into the theater. And I have to tell you that I thought to myself, what were my mother and father thinking to have placed me in this position? And I wondered about my safety. I wondered how I should feel. And this was a lesson to me on what a powerful quotient it is to feel different and alone and to be the only one. Well, a short time later, my high school was integrated, a single African-American girl with more than 2,000 white students and an all-white set of teachers. She traveled a great distance to get to the school, and most definitely, every single day, people looked at her with malice in their hearts. I'd like to know how she did it, day in and day out. I don't know how she managed. And I think I'm a strong person, but I'm not sure I could have done that if I had been put in her place. In many, many ways, those are the people that changed history in those days. The world was changed by people like that with courage and dignity, first at lunch counters, and first at the front of the bus, and first in a university, and first in a high school. People who endured with courage and dignity and discipline. Well, one more story. I was a junior in high school in Atlanta when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot and killed. The person that fired that shot somehow believed that if you quiet the pulse of a man, you have silenced his ideas and muted his power. Just the opposite occurred. People began to pour in Atlanta. It was interesting. My youngest brother was viewed as too young to participate in case something happened that he wouldn't be able to find his way home. He does not forgive my parents for that to this day. And my mother was at church working hard to make sure people had a place to sleep and food to eat because there were so many people there. Well, the funeral procession, as you perhaps know, began at Ebenezer Baptist Church. And it's hard to describe what it was like. Incredibly orderly, calm. We walked in rows, many times holding hands, spanning the entire width of the street for miles. The only way that I can describe how profound it was and how many people were there is that you would have somebody, say, behind you with an incredible voice who would begin to sing, say, "We shall overcome." And everybody started to join. And then farther down the line, people would start to join. And then more people joined. So that when you reached the end, you heard the voices recede off into the distance, much like a train receding as it goes into the distance. That tells you just how many people were there going down that street so that you could hear the sound just slowly disappear into the distance as everybody was just a millisecond starting their song just a little bit later than the people immediately behind them. Well, Atlanta was stunned by the magnitude of the outpouring. They were stunned by the impact of this man. And you know, there were a lot of people there that just didn't have a clue. When the procession went by the state capital of Georgia, it was surrounded by police with rifles. They were certain that we would riot and storm the Georgia Capitol. Not a single person standing around that Capitol must have ever heard a speech by Martin Luther King, or they would have known that this was about love, and it was about dignity, and it was about justice, and it had nothing to do with storming the Georgia State Capitol. Well, my father went to work the next day, and he was surrounded by a few workers in the plant that he supervised, and they said, "We know where you've been. Why did you do that?" And my father, very capable of standing up for what he believed in, said, "I believe history will show that we should all have walked with Martin Luther King." And I thought this was my last chance. I'm sorry, I break up every single time.
It's okay.
That is my image of my dad right there. Well, you know something? I think he was wrong. It's never too late to walk with that man. Okay. Isn't it a profound, the impact of your parents on the way you think and believe and what is special to you? Well, each and every day we have an opportunity, I think, to focus and recognize that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And there's great power in discovering the good in your fellow humans. Well, at Penn State, we are currently celebrating an effort called All In. And the whole focus of All In is to promote diversity and inclusion and to make inclusion a very strong part of the fabric of Penn State University. It's generated a lot of discussion. I think it's generated some progress. I think when we started it from the viewpoint of all of the people at Penn State that were feeling vulnerable, and across many, many people, many faiths, and many countries. And now I think it's probably more important than ever. And so I want to thank you for all that you do, and I want to thank you for allowing Molly and I to be a part of this service here today. Thank you.